Well, this here is the all-new Hyundai Grand i10 Nios, and the i10 brand really has been like a solid rock for Hyundai. And the i10 brand over the last 12 years has really established Hyundai as the maker of premium hatchback cars over the last 12 years or so. And Hyundai now wants to take the game further up a level with the launch of this new model, which is called the Nios. But the big question is it better than established rivals, especially the Maruti Swift? I'll answer that question by the end of this video review, so stay tuned. Budmo, as you might be aware by now, is the online expert in terms of spare parts. If you want a spare part for your vehicle, they have it in their list. They have the most extensive spare parts catalog, right from the most affordable small car to the top of the line luxury car, you name the car, and they have the spare parts for it. And the best point is that they have the spare parts from a host of different component makers and different price segments for the same spare part. So if you want to buy a cheaper part from a different maker or a more expensive part from a different component maker, they have the option for you. And they also promise you 10 days assured return. Well, so let me quickly tell you about a couple of negative points about this car. The first big negative, of course, is the fact that this grey color can really soil rather easily. It's a very light color, so it can soil, and that's something that will be appreciated by the dry cleaners because they will really be making a lot of money out of you. The other negative, of course, is that the seats don't have that kind of cushioning that you would have wanted. It does feel a little softish, the seat. The support for the low back also is a bit on the softer side, and the support for your under thighs also could have been more generous. So that's something that buyers would have wanted. Other than that, it's a superb place to be in. The equipment levels inside this car are very good. You of course get wireless charging for your mobile phone, which is a very cool touch. You also get a huge touchscreen, which really does look very cool, and there is a cool glove box as well. Now the touchscreen is one of the better ones on any car. It comes with Apple's CarPlay as well as Android Auto, and I have to say the menus, submenus, everything are very clearly marked. And in terms of design as well as the ambience, this car feels like a very European car. It feels very upmarket, and it really does have a sense of a wow factor in it. As soon as you step inside this car, you'll really feel that you've put your money on the right car because it just has that certain wow factor. One area where I really prefer the Swift is in the seat comfort. The seats on the Swift are absolutely brilliant. Overall cushioning is very good, support for your lower back is good, support for your under thighs is good, and you also get these nice bolsters, which means that these seats should hold you well. Definitely ahead of the Grand i10 Nios. Where I also feel that this car is slightly ahead is overall in the AC panel. It looks really nice, and in terms of the features, both cars are really neck and neck. You get almost the same features on both cars. This one though misses out on wireless charging for your mobile phone. There's no armrest, and the glove box also is really tiny. It's a very small glove box, so that's also a big negative on this car. This one also is very dark, so it looks sporty, nice, but on a long distance journey it can just start feeling a little bit claustrophobic and just feel like you're hemmed in because it's a very dark cabin. But because of the Nios, the fresher Nios, I think the overall design, the dashboard layout and stuff, I think the Nios is a car which I prefer more in terms of the interiors. But which car do I prefer in terms of the back seat? Let's jump in the back seats now and talk about that. Well, so if you prefer to be sitting in the back seat all day long, then this is a car that you'll really enjoy because, as you can see, knee room is more than sufficient, headroom also is more than adequate, and my height for reference is 5'10", and the front seat has been adjusted for my height. So if you're about 5'10", 5'11", even if you're about 6 feet tall, you'll be easily comfortable in these seats. The seats themselves are decent in terms of the comfort, and the good point is that you get large windows. The aperture also is nice and wide. Well, same in the back seat now of the Maruti Suzuki Swift. Now the seats in themselves are nice and comfortable. There's decent amount of knee room, good amount of headroom, and no big reasons to complain about. But when you compare it with the Nios, you realize that there aren't any AC vents over here, which the Nios has. Also, there's a blackened out pillar and a blackened out plastic bit here, which makes the cabin feel a little claustrophobic, not as open and airy, because even the upholstery is all black, so it doesn't feel as airy as the one inside the Nios. So for sheer space, for sheer comfort, and for overall the ambience inside the cabin in the back seat, I think the Nios clearly has the advantage. The back seat department, the winner is the Nios. Now let's see which car wins the battle of the boot. let's talk about the driving bits of the car, because that's what we're here to talk about now in this part of the review. And I have to say that this car doesn't really have the same kind of driver involvement and the same kind of driver engagement that the Maruti Suzuki Swift or even the Ford Figo has to offer at this price point. That said, it is a very hassle-free car to drive. It's a car which offers you total peace of mind, and it's a car which will get you from point A to point B without getting tired, because the clutch, the gearbox and the steering wheel are very light. You get excellent visibility all across. The A pillar isn't the chunkiest, so you can easily look around it. There's a huge window at the back. This mirror here also is of a large size, and the side view mirrors also give you a very good view of whatever's happening behind you. So in terms of driving this car, it offers you a nice as well as a mature driving experience. Talking about mature, what's also mature about this car is the ride comfort. Yes, the ride comfort on this car is very good, and Hyundai has tuned up the suspension slightly on the firmer side of the Nios, but that said, it soaks in the bumps. It's pretty supple for travel in the town, and also on the highway it does feel very steady and very reassuring, and it does soak in all the bumps on the highway. It's only the sharpest of sharp crevices which will enter the cabin, so really kudos to the engineers at Hyundai for tuning up the suspension on the Grand i10 Nios. The petrol is a good engine in terms of refinement, in terms of power delivery as well. Power delivery is very linear, but it can't be called a true driver's car, unlike the Maruti Suzuki Swift. This one doesn't offer the same kind of engagement, but what it does is that it offers you very good peace of mind and a hassle-free driving experience, because the steering wheel, well, it's not as engaging as the Swifts or the Figos, but it's light enough, it's accurate enough, and it's also decent in terms of feedback, so you can get from point A to point B without having to tire yourself out. Unlike some other cars in this segment where the steerings are very heavy, this one is light, so it will not tire your arms out. Now, if you are someone who drives mostly in the city, which is 90% of hatchback buyers, they do prefer to keep their cars in the city. The power on the car is more than sufficient. Both the diesel and the petrol offer you decent power, and for that occasional highway trip also, it's quite okay if you drive within acceptable speed limits of about 80 or 90 kph. For that kind of performance, the power is more than sufficient. So overall, in terms of the driving dynamics, I'd give the Grand i10 a decent score of 88 out of 100. It might not offer you the same kind of excitement and thrills that the Swift and the Figo offer, but in terms of drivability, overall ride comfort, as well as refinement, it is a very mature and very sensible package. Now, both these cars come with a 1.2 litre petrol engine, but the difference is quite evident as soon as you start driving off this car. The Swift feels a lot more responsive, a lot more agile, a lot more willing to get into your throttle inputs, to understand your throttle inputs, and as soon as you drive this car, you'll be more happy because the engine just feels a little more livelier than the one on the Nios. The steering wheel also, it's just as light as the one on the Nios, so people who drive a lot in the city have no reason to complain about. But this one feels a little more feelsome. There's not much in it, but a little more feelsome than the one on the Nios. And the chassis also just feels a little more sporty, a little more dynamic, and likes to change directions better because the body roll is well under control, and the chassis just feels a little more lively when you push it into corners. So in that sense also, it's a nicer car for people who call themselves keen drivers. If you're just buying your car for driving, then definitely this one has the advantage. What this also has the advantage is the overall gearbox action. The gearbox on the manual is light and easy to operate. The clutch action also is nice and springy. The AMTs, well, both of them are almost the same. There's a little bit of lurchiness, a little bit of those jhatkas. So both of them are very similar in that regard. Ride comfort wise, well, this one has a slightly stiff edge to its suspension setup, which means that on the highway, it feels a little more reassuring than the Nios. But in the city, some of those badly patched roads, some of them can just make their presence felt. It's not a deal breaker, but yes, some of them just might enter the cabin. One area where this car is definitely behind the Nios though is in the overall visibility department. The visibility on this car just isn't as good because the rearview mirrors are much smaller. There's a big blackened out C-pillar, so sometimes when you're reversing the car, you might have some blind spots because remember, a lot of people will buy this car in the base version or the trim version, which is just above the base. So for them, they won't get the fancy reverse camera, etc. So the blind spot is there as well, and even this mirror doesn't have the same kind of a depth of field like you do on the Nios's overall mirror, and also because it's a dark and black cabin, you just feel a little more claustrophobic in the long run. So these are areas where this car's behind, but one area where this one is ahead, as I just said, is overall in the refinement, because when you're starting this car from cold, when you're driving on the highway, when you're even at standstill at a signal, it just feels so quiet, so nice, and so calm inside the cabin that you'll simply forget everything else out there. So that's one area where this one is ahead. Overall, which one would I prefer? Well, if you are a keen driver, do you want to drive yourself, you drive a lot on the highway, you drive a lot up in the hills, then definitely the advantage is with the Swift in the driving department, and it deserves a slightly better score than the Nios in the driving department alone.